Hola, bienvenidos y bienvenidas a nuestra primera conversación disversa. Soy Andrea Medina, fundadora y directora de disversa.com. Hoy damos inicio a este espacio de conversación con destacadas personas con discapacidad, promotoras de derechos y personas que aportan por la diversidad, equidad e inclusión. En esta primera conversación disversa tengo el honor de hablar con Sara Minkara, asesora especial sobre los derechos internacionales de las personas con discapacidad del gobierno de Estados Unidos. Welcome, Sara. Thank you for this interview. It's an honor for me to have you in this space.
Well, I'm happy to be with you today, Andrea.
Sara, you were in Chile a few weeks ago and participated in activities and meetings, getting to know our reality regarding inclusion. To begin, I would like to know what was your impression of the work being done in Chile.
So, yes, I spent almost a week in Chile, where I came for the first Latin America Zero Project Conference, which focused on inclusive education. But I also did a lot of bilateral meetings where I met with civil society, met with organizations for persons with disabilities. I met with different government agencies, the Minister of Social Affairs, Vice Minister of Labor, Education, Foreign Ministry, and also the Minister of Sports. And then we also met with the private sector. So my impression is that there's a lot of movement and progress towards disability inclusion. And then one example is that there's an inclusion policy, employment policy that requires every single company to have an inclusion manager to focus on disability inclusive employment. The challenge is how do we really move towards full implementation? How do we shift the culture and the narrative so everyone in society sees the value of disability inclusion? And I think that's a constant challenge that we see all over the world. Society still sees us from a point of protection and point of let's take care of them versus from a point of you have value, we need to include you, we need to integrate you into society.
Okay, thank you. Your work emphasized the promoting the right of the inclusion education, and you value the importance of the early intervention. How is this issue approached in the United States, and what do you believe is essential to in effective intervention in children with disabilities?
So there's a couple of things. One important element and variable is that how do we see disability not from a medical model but from a social model? How do we really understand a disability as a comprehensive identity that we hold as individuals with disability and understand what are the barriers that we do face and will face in society, right? We need to make sure we're engaging families and parents from like home. We need to make sure we're engaging the community and make sure there's a community support. We need to make sure as we move towards inclusive education, it's not just physical access, but also how do we make sure teachers are trained, the narrative within schools is inclusive, the tools and resources are inclusive across the board, right? Again, I always start with how do we look at the barriers that we as people with disabilities face and how do we break down those barriers so each of us can embrace our disability identity and also be able to fulfill our potential and our value in society.
In addition of the inclusion education, what other topics should be prioritized and why? It should be work, climate change, culture, artificial intelligence, or another area.
I would say all areas need to have disability at the center. And how do we get to that point is the narrative shift, right? How do we, in most spaces, when we look at society, when we look at these issue sets and these conversations and these topics, whether it's AI, climate action, food security, all these different things, a lot of times people with disabilities and the disability perspective is left behind, left out. Why? Let's ask ourselves the question, why? Why are we left out? And if we are brought forward, we're brought forward from a point of protection or vulnerability. We are people that can actually provide solutions to the issue at hand. We are contributors. we are an important stakeholder in any of these conversations. So I would say an important element and variable is narrative shift, cultural shift. And this is where working with folks like you, media from the media sector and the entertainment industry, and making sure we're putting forward a value-based narrative on disability is really important, because that's going to result in then bring in the disability voice in all of these topics.
And for the last bit that you say, that the media, in your opinion, what the role should be the media play in promoting the inclusion of people with disabilities?
The media should be inclusive across the board, inclusive in making sure we have more journalists with disability represented across the board. We need to make sure the media sector is inclusive and accessible for persons with disabilities, and the media needs to report on people with disabilities, not on just disability specific issue sets, but when we're talking about climate action, how do we bring forward the disability voice and narrative? When we're talking about crisis, AI, all these issues, how do we bring people with disabilities to the table? But again, media might do it, but they might do it, oh my God, look at what's happening to them. We don't see the stories of value of people with disabilities in the media world. And I think that's what we need to get. How do we get media sector to really elevate the stories of value that people with disabilities bring across the board in all aspects of our society?
And finally, as a woman with disability with a distinguished career and now working in the United States government, what advice would you give to young girls and women with disabilities who are starting your own journey and want to participate in their communities?
I would say, growing up, moving forward in our lives, we're always going to hear what society assumes of our capabilities, our potential, what we should or shouldn't do, who we are. And I think, how do we not let that impact truly, to embrace our full potential and embrace our disability from a positive identity, and understand that we have something beautiful to contribute to this world. We truly do. Every single one of us have something to contribute to this world. How do we really listen to our inner voice, inner strength, and see our full self as something to embrace and be proud of, and see the beauty behind, and including our disability identity, and understand that we are here to be a positive change to our society.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That is an important message for the young girls and women with disabilities, for the people here in Chile and the world. Your example is very important for all the people with disabilities or without disability, for everyone. And thank you for your time. Thank you for this interview, and the team of the U.S. Embassy and Chile for facilitating this interview.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you for all the work that you're doing. And I'm excited.
Muchas gracias a todas las personas que nos vieron hoy, y que los invitamos a seguirnos en disversa.com y compartir este video. Será hasta una próxima conversación dispersa.